Alright, before we continue, let's have a look at our form in the final website. So let's give our email address and submit. Now let's check out the link and click on it. Okay, so this is the form that we need to place in there. Okay, so first we're going to have a couple of fields for our passwords and then a submit button. So let's go ahead and create these. So we're going to use the Bootstrap form group, okay, to create these inputs. So that's going to be a div of class form group. Okay, and then we're going to place our password inside the div. So the password is going to be an input, okay, of type password. Okay, so let's give our first input a name password. We're going to need the name when we write the PHP code which will process the form. Okay, let's also give it an ID, password, and a placeholder which is going to be enter password. And finally, we need to give our input a class form control. Okay, so we covered all this in the Bootstrap chapter. Okay. All right, now you can add a label, okay, for the inputs. So if you want, you can hide this label by giving it the class SR only, okay, so that it can be used for assistive technologies. Otherwise, you can keep it like that. Okay, so we're going to use the for attributes, which is going to go to the ID of our input, which is password. Okay, and let's write something inside our label. Like enter your new password. Okay. Now let's copy this input to create the second password input. So the second one is going to be, we're going to change everything to password 2 and change the label to re-enter password. Okay, so the type is password, the name is password 2, ID password 2, placeholder re-enter password. Okay, and now the submit button. So that's going to be an input, okay, of type submit. Okay, and let's give it a name, which we'll use for the PHP code, and let's name it resets password. Okay, and to style the button, so let's give it a class button. Okay, and to give it this nice green color, let's give it a class button success. And finally, to enlarge it like that, let's give it button large. Okay, and now we're going to need to give it a value which represents the text you see inside the button. So the value is going to be resets password. Okay, so these are the inputs that you can see. Okay, now let's move to the hidden inputs. So you're going to have a couple of hidden inputs, the user ID and the key. Okay, so why do we need these hidden inputs? The reason why we do that is to make sure that the user has actually clicked on the right link that they received by email, and that those parameters that you find in the link are the same that you find in the database, okay, or in the actual forgot password table, okay. So later on, when you want to process the data inside this form, you're going to need to do the same checks we did before for the parameters user ID and key, okay. You're going to need to check again if these match the ones that you would find in the forgot password table, okay, and that's very important. So now let's add these couple of fields, okay, and hide them inside our form. So the first one is going to be the actual key, okay, so that's going to be an input. So to hide this, we're going to give it a type hidden, okay. Also, let's give it a name that we will use in the PHP code, okay, and also let's give it a value. So the value here is going to be the same value, okay, of our variable key, okay. And we're going to do the same thing for the second input, which is going to be our user ID. Okay, so that's our form. Now to process the form, we're going to write some PHP code inside the store resets password.php file. Okay, and then we're going to create an AJAX call to this file to process the data, okay, submitted by our user in the form. Okay, so let's start with the AJAX call first. Okay, so we're going to write a script for the AJAX call like this. Let's delete all that. Okay, so our script is going to go right after this one. Okay. And let's write this comment right there. Okay. So the AJAX call is going to be very similar to the ones we placed inside the JavaScript file. Okay. So let's copy one of these. So I'm going to copy the last one. Okay. Okay, let's have a bit more space. And okay. Okay, that's better. So once the form is submitted, so we want to select the form using its ID. So let's go back to the form and specify a few attributes for our form. Okay. So let's give it a method. We're going to use the post method again. And also let's give it an ID, which we'll need for the AJAX call. And that's going to be password reset. Okay. So the ID of our form is password reset. Like that. And we are sending the AJAX call to the file store resets password.php. So the URL is going to be that file. Okay. So we're using the post method. Okay. And So this file, what it's going to do, if everything is fine, it's going to reset the password for our user. Otherwise, if there are any errors, it's just going to return an error message. So in that case, that message is going to be stored inside our data variable. Okay, and we want to show that error message in our page. Okay, so what I'm going to do right after the heading, okay, right there, I'm going to create a div where we're going to place our error message. So let's give it an ID, for example, results message. Okay, so if anything is returned by that file, then we're going to show it inside this div. All right, so if we've got anything returned by that file, we're going to show it inside the results message div. Well, actually, this includes also if we have a success message from that file. So if we reset the password for our user, we'll also send a success message, okay, from that file. All right. So this is both for success messages and error messages. Okay. And we're going to keep the same message. We're going to show if there is any error with the AJAX call. Okay. But we're going to show the message in the same div that we created earlier. All right. All right, now let's save our code and just echo anything inside this PHP file. Okay, so let's just write some PHP code with a simple echo statement. Test. So let's try our code. So forgot password. Let's submit. Let's check our inbox and click on the link. So we've got an error running the query. So let's have a quick look at our query. Okay, select user ID. Okay, so I'm missing the single quotes. Okay, for the sign variable. So let's save and run the query again. So we're still getting the same error. If we have a quick look at our table, we can see that we've got a notification there saying that the name key, okay, is a MySQL reserved keyword. So what we're going to need to do, we're going to need to change this key to something else. Okay, so let's change the name of this column to reset key, for example, like that. Okay, so let's save that. Now we're going to need to go back to our code and change that to reset key wherever we have a query. So that's going to be here. Okay, so let's save that. If we go back to the forgot password file and look for key using Control F, that's another one. Okay. Save, and let's have a look here as well. Any queries with that column name, we'll need to change it. That's fine. Okay, now let's save and try again. Okay, and now it's working, so you can see our form. All right. So now if we submit the form just like that, we expect this PHP file to return test, okay? And the Ajax call is supposed to fill the div that we have right after the heading, okay, using that message. So let's try. Okay, and we can see our message right there. Okay. So now we're going to need to write PHP code so that this file returns a success or error message depending on the inputs of our user.